r/explainlikeimfive. United Sun 6928 says. Explain like I'm 5. So if the maximum speed of anything relative to anything is 3.00 10^8 m/s, does that mean that two planets moving apart from each other in opposite directions can only be 3.00 10^8 m/s? So suppose we're on Earth and there's a planet traveling near, as close as possible, light speed relative to Earth. If we tossed an object in the opposite direction on our planet, will it just not move at all? I'm a little confused. Sal 696,969 says. The trick is that the space itself is also expanding, and you need to add that to the growing space between them. I am Papu says. I might very likely be way off here or simply misunderstanding your question. But if we are watching something going east at 0.9 C and something else going west at 0.9 C, that would be just that. Two things moving in different directions. From their reference point, however, things will be perceived differently. Salanderthus says. The speed limit is relative to the point of view you measure it from. So the ball will move at whatever speed you throw it at. The planet zooms past at 99% the speed of light, and you throw the ball 99% of the speed of light in the opposite direction, and you will see both of them move super duper fast away from you in opposite directions. However, someone standing on the other planet will see the Earth zoom past at 99% of the speed of light, and the ball will zoom a bit faster at, roughly, 99.99%. The speed of light. I didn't do the actual maths for it, but it would be something like that. r/explainlikeimfive. Particulate 5339 says. Explain like I'm 5. In comparison to the types of power stations, why do nuclear power stations take seemingly forever to build and become functional? I read on the /r/world news subreddit some comment about France pushing for more nuclear power plants, and that construction is beginning, but will only be ready in the next 2 decades. That seems like a very long time to get just one power station up and running. What exactly is the cause of the long time to build when other types of super project buildings like the Burj Khalifa and dam projects take significantly less time to become operational? Leestrub 1397 says. Reading all these comments about costs and complexity got me thinking about Germany's decision to shut down all their NPPs, and it almost brings me to tears of sadness. And I'm not even from Germany. Tom Chase says. Significant effort is made in not only the construction of the reactors, but also the funding, approval, and certification of them. Nuclear power plants are both technologically and politically intense. A destructive accident at a nuclear plant could take forever to clean up, like for at least half a century and many more to come. That's why it's insanely difficult to approve for a project and keep it approved during funding, construction and certification. Any mistakes could cause the plan to fall through. People don't trust these things. That's why people both for and against them test the frick out of them to either prove it's safe or the complete opposite. That process takes years. Cox says. People point to safety and many other factors, but in reality it is mostly because we dropped the tech 4 decades ago. It is underfunded, all the modern stuff is basically experimental designs rarely even tested, and it has no political will to push it forward despite the necessity. If let's say Europe would be building one new reactor yearly, they would be done on time and on budget, given the building and technical expertise would not have been reinvented for each new project, people trained from ground up, and so. r/explainlikeimfive. That text 3511 says. Explain like I'm 5. How does your body know to crave certain foods that contain vitamins or nutrients your body needs more of? I've heard that when your body is lacking whatever vitamin or nutrients you need, you will crave certain foods that contain those things. How does your brain make the connection? that this type of food will help, even if you don't consciously know you have that specific deficiency, or that what you need from that food is in that food in the first place. Is it from a previous exposure to that food? I don't even know if this premise to begin with is accurate. Elephant Sarah Hughes says, I've noticed I crave orange juice if I haven't eaten fruit in a while, and I assume it's because of the vitamin C. I have a hard time digesting fiber, so straight up fruit isn't always great. Lil Samaha says, the scary thing is that your cravings might reflect what you need or what something living inside you needs. Citation needed. I remember a study going around at the food co-op I worked at in the 90s coming to the conclusion that excessive candida in the gut can increase the desire for foods that it needs to flourish. If true, and there certainly seems to be mounting evidence for some kind of gut microbiome to unconscious thought connection, what is the mechanism at work to handle the communication there? Yikes. Resilient Biscuits says, I don't believe this is something the body does. I think there is research out there that says this isn't what causes cravings. Colonsram 1916 says, the short answer is billions of years of evolution. Our sense of smell and taste is essentially detecting different chemicals in the food we ingest. You get cravings for food that is rich in those vitamins, thereby rewarding you for eating the food that you need. r/explainlikeimfive. iDrinksman says, explain like I'm 5. How can our body hold pee for hours while sleeping, but have a hard time holding it when awake? Informal Method 5401 says, men also have an inflatable, sword-like organ that helps to keep the urine in during the night. Stockholmo says, there are two parts to this. 1. Typically, urine production is lower when sleeping, so it takes more time to fill up the bladder. 2. While sleeping, the bladder can tolerate larger volumes. This is likely partly due to when lying down there is less pressure on the bladder, and partly due to sleep causing the brain to be less sensitive to bladder filling. r/explainlikeimfive. Finlandery says, explain like I'm 5. Why do pipes freeze/break after temperature rises from -20°C to 0? Hi, I keep hearing/reading warnings that water pipes are in great danger to freeze/break when temperature increases rapidly from really cold to 0. Why is this? I get that when temperature gets to just above 0, what is frozen will start to melt and you realize which pipes are broken, but why is increasing temperature itself breaking/freezing pipes? Still Floating says, it is the pressurized liquid water that usually bursts a pipe, at least in a house. Consider the frozen section, then liquid water, then the faucet. The argument can be made that by heating the liquid water in a pipe, oops, you missed the frozen section. The expanding liquid water could be the immediate cause of a burst. Either way, I hope for your sake the break is easy to get to. Tashkiara says, you're missing the point of breakage. Water is unusual in that it's at its densest, not at the point of freezing, 0 Celsius, but a little higher, 4 Celsius. That means when water freezes, it's getting less dense, it's expanding. When the outside temperature is wildly colder than 0, the water inside the hottabibs in your outer walls is freezing deeper into the home, but it may have nowhere to expand to. It is forced to freeze in place, and the pressure can crack pipes. That's the primary reason for those warnings on very cold days. If there's no heat in a building, then even 0 Celsius is bad news. This is why people in northern areas with a real winter will either pay to heat a cottage or other secondary home, usually to 5 or so, or more likely, close off the water and drain the pipes before winter. Because even just 0 is enough to destroy the pipes in that circumstance. r/explainlikeimfive. Horizon Still Light says, explain like I'm 5. How are people swatted? Swatting someone refers to getting law enforcement, usually SWAT teams, to another person, usually for malice-related reasons. It is common for large streamers to face this, as people want to capture their reactions on video and sometimes private details. In the United States, there are 3 general circumstances in which a warrant isn't required: exigent circumstances, plain view, and consent. Exigent circumstances are situations where context necessitates law enforcement to act quickly. A fire, actively running after a suspect, hot pursuit, a hostage situation, etc. Plain view is when an illegal act or substance is clearly visible, like drugs in a bag or domestic violence through a window. Consent is pretty self-explanatory. An individual voluntarily allows law enforcement to do what they need to. With this in mind, how does swatting someone work? How can someone, with no evidence, call law enforcement and get them to break down someone else's door? And why can't the victim simply refuse on the basis of the above situations not applying? Jagged Metalist says, how can someone, with no evidence, call law enforcement and get them to break down someone else's door? Police take the call as evidence that there is exigent circumstances. Leaving whether the police SWAT response is heavy-handed or not aside, if you were in a immediately life-threatening situation, you would want the police to respond quickly, right? Sotso3 says, typically the bad guy calls the dispatch center on a non-emergency line through a VoIP line. They act out a script describing an emergency at the target's house, usually a murder or hostage situation in progress. This gets the cops to respond, as if it's actually happening, and chaos ensues. Sometimes the cops figure it out with minimal chaos, and sometimes the cops shoot some innocent people in the chaos. Most of the time it's somewhere between these two situations. In most states a false emergency is a crime, but is amplified significantly if someone is harmed in the response. Conspirized says, I got swatted because the guy I was renting a room to told his niece that he'd taken a bunch of pills and was going to shoot himself in the head with one of my guns, then hung up on her and refused to answer the phone. I had no idea this was going on, so when my door popped open a little bit I thought it was just the breeze because ick now. It was one of those cheap shitty apartment doors that does that. You can imagine my surprise when I found myself pinned to the ground moments later, with a cop screaming, "Where's the gun? Where's the gun?" And a home absolutely full of armored mother frickers with AR-15s. I was not pleased with the experience. 0/10. Do not recommend. Edit. I realized I didn't actually say what happened to dude. He had not, in fact, taken a bunch of pills. He did not have one of my guns. That would have been impossible. He was just extremely drunk and being foolish. They sent him to the hospital for alcohol poisoning, and I had his son pick up his shit the next day. That's all for this video. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe.